Hi there, and welcome to Fuzzy on the Details. My name is Fuzzy, and if you like the Marvel Multiverse Role-Playing Game, you've come to the right place. Today, as a follow-up to the Iconic Weapons rules video, I've got some homebrew to share. I'll include some tips for those looking to create their own iconic weapons, and I'll have some alternate builds for two of the weaker iconic weapons from the Core Rulebook. Your comments and questions from the last video were really insightful and a ton of fun to answer, so please keep those coming. Alright, let's get into those details. To create a balanced iconic weapon, there are three things I want to keep in mind from last video. They should be more than just a damage multiplier, since stacking rules often negate this bonus, especially at higher ranks. Iconic weapon is a power, so it should feel as strong as a power that a character could take at their current rank. It should always do a little bit more than signature attack, which is only a trait granting an edge with a specific weapon or attack. And flexibility is great, but our weapon should do a little more than just switch up some effects. Some of the most fun iconic weapons in the game, like Daredevil's Billy Club, grant a damage modifier, have a built-in flexibility aspect, and do something else. As usual, we're going to try and stick to the existing rules and use them in fun ways, not create any rules bloat. I think Matt Forbeck has given us a really amazing framework that we can build upon. I don't think there's any need to create new systems wholesale. We want these weapons to work with future expansions anyway, right? Finally, let's talk about this last bullet a bit. When I think of iconic weapons in either the comics or the MCU, the first two that come to mind are Mjolnir and Cap's shield. Think about how far back the history goes for those two items, 60, 70, 80 years. So much has happened, so many power-ups, power-downs, retcons. It's impossible to capture all of the abilities from many of these iconic weapons that we could design. My advice? Don't even try. Zero in on your favorite story arc, movie, or show, and think of a couple moments that made you go wow, and try to translate those authentically, and I think you'll be better off. There are numerous ways to faithfully recreate an iconic weapon in the game, and none of them are wrong. It is only appropriate that homebrew weapon number 1 is the Staff of One. Passed down through the Minoru family line, the Staff of One can be summoned from the wielder's very body through blood magic. The wielder can create nearly any magical effect possible, but only once. The power set of the Staff of One differs between the early comics, the recent comics, and the TV show. It sometimes allows the wielder to cast the same spell multiple times, so long as it's worded differently or in a different language. And in the TV show, they wanted to ensure younger audiences weren't exposed to self-harm, so it didn't require blood sacrifice. And maybe budget came into play because it wasn't summonable either. So, I've got at least 3 different incarnations of the staff to choose from. Personally, I most enjoyed the first volume of the Runaways comic, especially the way in which Nico Minoru discovers the staff's powers through trial and error. I think it's great storytelling and could be really fun to replicate in a game. So, to create this staff, we're going to look to Volume 1 of the Runaways for inspiration. Here are a few moments from the comics that stood out to me. It is established early on that the Staff of One can do pretty much anything Nico can think of, and one of the first uses is to freeze a target. However, the second time she tries the same spell effect, the staff randomly summoned a flock of pelicans. Hijinks ensued. Shortly after the pelican incident, she used the staff again with a different phrase and then figured out how it worked. In game terms, this feels like powerful hex to me, with the added element of tracking each spell you've cast and making sure you only do it once. This could lead to some very creative moments in the game. The second element of the staff I'd like to translate to rules is that blood must be shed to use it. This is something Nico figures out early on, and discovers that she need only give herself a small scratch to bring it forth. This doesn't seem to do her any lasting harm. I was initially thinking about applying the bleeding condition here, but that seems overkill for the small scratch we see in the art. And besides, I don't want to impart too many negatives on the staff since we've already got a restriction in place. Looking at how powerful Hex works, there is an extra focus cost for each use of the power. I think we can very neatly just change that to a health cost, and we're good to go. Obviously, we'll also need to make the Staff of One summonable. I think a health cost when the spell is cast covers us for when the user chooses to summon to cast a spell. But we can additionally say that the staff is automatically summoned whenever the user takes health damage or gets the bleeding condition. This could lead to some fun moments in game. And finally, this scene here is enough to tell me that the Staff of One should get the same +1 melee modifier that other weapons get. And that's it. Here's a recap. The Staff of One gives its user a +1 melee modifier. Once summoned, it grants the user powerful Hex, with the restriction that any power can only be used once, and it costs an extra 5 health instead of 5 focus. Note that powerful Hex has a rank cap, so this weapon will naturally scale with a character as they grow. Finally, the Staff of One is summonable, either as part of the casting of powerful Hex, or automatically when health is lost or the bleeding condition is applied. Let's move on to iconic weapon number 2. I'm resisting the urge to call these kitten mittens, but Shuri's Panther Gauntlets are so iconic, she's actually pictured with them in the core rulebook. Now, I'm a fan of both of the Black Panther movies, but I haven't read a lot of Black Panther comics, so I'm going to be pulling mainly from the MCU for this build. Let's take a look at this key scene for inspiration. Shuri uses her Panther Gauntlets to fire bolts of energy at enemies, strong enough to send them flying off the bridge, and even knock Killmonger back a step or two, eventually down to his knees, for at least a moment. So let's try and capture that power mechanically. The blasts are pretty powerful in the movie, seemingly able to one-shot lesser enemies, so let's use Elemental Blast to represent it instead of the less powerful Elemental Burst. To capture the effect of the enemies getting blown off that bridge, let's look to Elemental Push for some rules inspiration. Elemental Push can be used to move an enemy in any direction, so let's modify that language just a bit and go with the following. The Panther Gauntlets grant Elemental Blast Energy Type Force. In addition to the regular Force special effect, on a fantastic success, the target is also pushed back a number of spaces equal to the character's rank. I think the narrator can decide what pushed back means pretty easily. If you look at that video, one guy kind of veers off to the left, so I'd personally be generous with my interpretation. The gauntlets also function as a regular ranged weapon, granting a +1 agility modifier with the same range as a pistol, but with the force element special effect. Our end result is a functional and flexible weapon that is true to the movies and has a neat little extra effect built into the power that it grants. I like it. Okay, now let's take a look at a few reclamation projects from last video, starting with Mjolnir. Mjolnir is a powerful weapon with a lengthy history. It started off as a stick that Donald Blake found in a cave, and when he tapped it on the ground, he would transform into Thor. Quite different from what's in the MCU, which I'm personally more of a fan of. The screenshots at the top here show 3 different characters, Thor, Cap, and Jane, all raising the hammer high to collect lightning just before a big attack. Such a cool and cinematic moment, which got me thinking, what's going on here from a rules perspective? I like the idea of taking a moment to charge up before making a single climactic attack. So let's say that by charging an attack just before striking, the character gets an edge on that attack. I was debating whether this dramatic posing should cost a movement or a reaction, but given that this effect is similar to the help teammate reaction, let's go with that. Now let's take a look at what Thor does after he's charged Mjolnir in this way. I think what's going on here is the supernova power, which Thor doesn't currently have, so that'll be a nice addition. Also, in the movies, people are always getting knocked down when they do this, so let's apply the prone condition on a fantastic success as well. Finally, let's hear what Thor has to say about flying.
And when I spun it really, really fast, it gave me the ability to fly.
You rode a hammer?
No. I used to spin it really fast, and it would pull me off.
Oh my god, the hammer pulled you off.
Well, pretty clear to me. Let's have Mjolnir grant Fly 2 instead of it being a base part of Thor's character. Here are the final stats for Mjolnir. It retains the damage multipliers it had in the core rulebook, but grants a power that has a slight bump to it and uses a charging effect that borrows heavily from an existing reaction. Like many other iconic weapons, it also grants a new movement type. Verily, 'tis truly iconic. But are we done? I say thee nay. I wanted to quickly tackle the 2 iconic weapons from the Wrecker and Thunderball in the Wrecking Crew. There's one thing I really disliked about these that I didn't mention in the last video, and that's that you have 2 members of one team with exactly the same mechanical effect for their weapon. That makes for a terribly boring encounter. So one of my goals here is to really ensure that each weapon feels distinct. Let's start with the Wrecker. He wrecks stuff. He's always bringing buildings down in the comics with ridiculous speed, and there's even a scene of him I recall using his crowbar as it was intended to pry open Dr. Doom's armor in the infamous Iron Man run. Let's have the crowbar apply an edge to any attempt to attack objects or when using the escape action. Attacking objects includes disarming opponents, and this rule works either with the existing rules on page 40, but also with the proposed disarm rules in Tony's workshop. Finally, let's have the magic crowbar grant the battle-ready trait. The Wrecker is often described as being relentless. The scene here is a good example of how he can land attack after a powerful attack. But with a focus of only 30, he could exhaust himself just by using Smash twice, which doesn't feel right for the leader of the team. So giving him an extra 30 focus points could go a long way. Thunderball is often depicted swinging his iconic weapon around and attacking everyone within reach, but he's already got the whirling frenzy power, so let's have it grant him the rank 4 unstoppable assault. Thunderball has a 60 focus, so he could make good use of it. These two weapons are a little more straightforward in their design because characters like the Wrecking Crew aren't often going to get as much focus at your table compared to heroes. They might only be around for 3 or 4 rounds of combat and that's it. So you can save your better, more creative ideas for heroes or archvillains that might stick around longer. Hey, if you made it this far, please consider hitting that thumbs up button or subscribing. I really appreciate it. Here are the stats for all 5 of the weapons we went over today. I'll put these up on my website as a PDF with a link in the description. Do you have any alternate builds? I'd love to hear them. Let me know in the comments. Well, true believers, that's all I've got on iconic weapons for today. But if you'd like to see some more homebrewed builds, there are some prolific creators putting out great stuff on the Marvel Multiverse Facebook page and on the subreddit. I'll add links to those in the description as well. Thank you so much once again for all of your support, and we'll see you in the next video. Have a great day.